Be wary of picking up hitchhikers. It was a moonless night on a desolate stretch of the I-40 in Arizona. The road cut through the barren desert like a scar, flanked by looming saguaro cactus that cast eerie shadows in the pale glow of the car's headlights. Mark, a seasoned trucker, had driven this route countless times, but tonight felt different. The air was heavy, oppressive, and endless blackness seemed to swallow the world beyond his windshield. As Mark was driving the road, he caught the sight of something unusual in the distance. A lone figure stood by the roadside, arms stretched, thumb pointed skyward. Hitchhikers were rare on this route, especially at such an ungodly hour. Instinctively, he slowed the truck down. His curiosity piqued, despite an uneasy, settling feeling in his gut. The figure came into view, a young woman, pale and fragile looking, dressed in a white dress that fluttered in the desert breeze. Her eyes were hollow, almost vacant, but she smiled faintly as Mark pulled over. "Need a ride?" he called out, forcing cheerfulness into his voice. "Thank you," she replied softly, her voice barely a whisper. She climbed into the passenger seat, her cold presence sending a shiver down Mark's spine. "I'm heading to Flagstaff." "That work for you?" Mark asked, trying to dispel the creeping sense of dread. "Yes, that would be perfect," she answered, staring straight ahead. As they drove, Mark attempted to make small talk, but the woman remained distant, her answers short and devoid of emotion. The silence grew heavy, the only sounds the hum of the engine and the occasional rustle of the desert wind. Mark couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. After what felt like an eternity, he glanced over at her. "What's your name?" he asked. "Jenny," she replied, her voice almost echoing the confined space of the cab. "Nice to meet you, Jenny. You got family in Flagstaff?" She didn't respond immediately, and when she did, her voice was even fainter. "I used to." Mark's unease grew. He gripped the steering wheel tighter, his knuckles white. The road seemed to stretch endlessly into the darkness, the landscape never changing. He glanced at the dashboard clock. The time seemed frozen. "Used to?" he probed, his curiosity overriding his fear. Jenny turned to him, her eyes now wide and filled with indescribable sadness. "I was crushed on this road," she said quietly, 70 years ago. Mark's heart skipped a beat. He glanced at her again, and in that instant, her appearance shifted. Her once pristine white dress, now tattered and stained with blood, her face gaunt and deathly pale, bore the marks of a brutal end. He could see the dark, hollow sockets where her eyes should have been, and her mouth twisted in a grotesque grin. Panicking, Mark swerved the truck, trying to keep control. The radio crackled to life, emitting a garbled static before a chilling voice whispered, "She's not real, Mark." He slammed on the brakes, bringing the truck to a screeching halt. He turned to his passenger seat, but it was empty. Jenny was gone, as if she had never been there. Mark sat there, heart pounding, grasping for breath. The air inside the cab was freezing, and the oppressive silence returned. Gathering his courage, he stepped out of the truck. The night was still, the desert eerily quiet. In the dim light of his flashlight, he saw it. An old, weathered sign by the roadside, halfway buried in the sand. It read, "In memory of Jenny, victim of a tragic accident, 1954. His blood ran cold as he realized the truth. He had picked up a ghost, a restless spirit, doomed to wander the dark desert highway for eternity. Mark climbed back into his truck, his hands trembling as he drove away. He couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't alone. In the rear view, he saw a fleeting glimpse of Jenny standing at the roadside, waiting for her next ride.